Welcome, everyone, to the onpoli podcast. I'm Steve Paikin.
And I'm John Michael McGrath.
Today on the pod, an omnibus episode all about the Get It Done Act. Coming up, what you need to know.
We respond to your questions and blush at some kind comments about our first video podcast.
And in your column, my column, I'll focus on a special get-together, more than half a century in the making, that took a break from mindless partisanship for just a couple of hours.
And I'll chatter just a little bit more about that Get It Done Act. Spoiler, I'm not a fan.
It's Friday, February 23rd, 2024, so let's get to it. Hey, partner.
Hello.
You know what's a good sign?
What is a good sign?
I'm about to tell you. It's a good sign when you do your first ever video edition of a podcast that you've been doing for 4 or 5 years, and they invite you to come back and do it again the following week.
Right.
It's a good sign.
We were not canceled after the pilot.
We were not canceled after the pilot. Isn't that a beautiful thing?
Yes.
Give me a little fist bump on that. That's a beautiful thing. Okay. Well, normally we start this podcast with an email that caught our fancy, but we're going to mix it up a bit this week because last week was our first video episode of the podcast, as we indicated, and we got far more reaction than we normally do. So we're going to hold off responding to multiple emails until later in this episode, and we're going to dive right into events at Queen's Park this past week because MPPs were back in the saddle, so to speak, after a 10-week hiatus away from the building. You were there, John Michael, on the first day back. I watched it on TV, but you were there. What stood out to you?
It always has the feeling of the first day of school. And in fact, as I was walking through the halls, one MPP did say, first day of kindergarten to me.
Who said that? You want to name names?
No, I will not name their names. Treating that as off the record.
Okay.
Kind of. I would say everybody seemed energized for very different reasons, right? The Liberals have a still brand new leader, and Bonnie Crombie was first of the day with a press conference in the media studio, and then she attended the traditional post-question period scrums. Liberals feeling, energized and ready to take the fight to the government again. The Premier, conversely, also, I think is, at least so far, is enjoying the idea of tussling with Crombie and certainly is, the Conservatives have called her the queen of the carbon tax, and they've launched all of these attacks against her. So
they love that you just repeated that.
I know. But my point is that Premier Ford really seems eager to sort of mix it up. The NDP obviously going after the government. I think most recently about the Supreme Court defeat. The Court of Appeal defeat over Bill 124, which was the government's wage suppression legislation. And then the Greens, and we'll get to this a bit more in a bit, but Mike Schreiner, very, very proud to introduce his second MPP to the Green Party.
They doubled the size of their caucus.
Yes. Been 5 years of work for Mike Schreiner as an MPP, but he has doubled the size of the caucus and was very happy about that.
Well, let me pick up on the Crombie angle because she is, of course, still trying to get her footing as the new Liberal leader. A new entrant to provincial politics as she is. She's been in municipal as the mayor of Mississauga. She was a Liberal MP federally, so provincial politics is new to her. She does not have a seat in the legislature, so how is she trying to get attention for the causes that she cares about?
The traditional way to do this, and we've seen this now with two Liberal leaders, because of course Stephen Del Duca also did not have a seat in the legislature. You show up for press conferences at the media studio, and technically you need an MPP to invite you to do that, but Bonnie Crombie has no problem finding a Liberal MPP willing to invite her.
Still a few down there, aren't there?
Yes,
are they up to 9 now?
I believe, it's 9. And one of the things that came out in the scrums after question period on Tuesday is that Bonnie Crombie is still seriously considering running in the Milton by-election that will happen with the,
Parm Gill, the departure of Parm Gill.
Yes, with the departure of Parm Gill for federal politics. So we'll obviously be keeping an eye on that.
I should let you know, I'm the one who's supposed to have the senior moments on this program, not you. I'm relying on you to help me when I have the senior moments.
Yeah, but see, I got like the brain problem with my phone. I Google everything now, and so my brain isn't actually used to storing things.
Okay. Moving right along, as they say.
Yes, moving right along. I mentioned the Tories are quite happy to launch these attacks against Bonnie Crombie. We did also get some definition there, what the Tories mean when they accuse her of wanting to bring in a carbon tax, because this was kind of not clear to me. And it turns out that what they're mostly referring to is the fact that Bonnie Crombie ran for Liberal MP, her federal career, in 2008. During that campaign, Stéphane Dion, the then federal Liberal leader, had proposed imposing a carbon tax nationally and cutting the GST.
The green shift, he called it.
Yes, indeed. And so they are saying that, Crombie supported that move. Therefore, she supports a carbon tax. Crombie is a bit more opaque on this topic, really refused to be pinned down about whether the Liberals still support the idea of bringing a provincial carbon tax back to Ontario. Of course, currently Ontario operates under the federal carbon tax.
It seems to me the federal government is not completely clear that it still wants a carbon tax, at least not for Atlantic Canada. But that's another edition for another show.
Yeah.
I want to pick up on the Green angle that you referenced a second ago, because yes, indeed, there is a second Green MPP at Queen's Park, an historic victory in a by-election in Kitchener Centre not all that long ago. The MPP's name is Aislinn Clancy. And I want to spell this for you because her first name is spelled Aislinn, but it's not pronounced Aislinn. It's pronounced Aislinn. How did she do in her first appearances at Queen's Park?
I want to say for a moment that, there are a lot of rituals and pageantry at Queen's Park, and at most of them I could take or leave. The ritual of a new MPP being presented to the House after a by-election win, they get marched into the House, they stand in front of the speaker, and usually the party leader introduces them and says, and they now come to claim their right to take a seat in this legislature. It is one of my favorite rituals. I just love it.
And everybody applauds, right?
Everybody applauds.
Yeah.
It is a moment of collegiality in the House as they welcome a new member. Everybody's on different teams, but they're all playing the same sport,
Nicely put.
And so this was slightly more special because, as we say, this is kind of historic. This is only the second ever a Green MPP in the House. She got, I don't know if it's possible to rank whether she got more or less applause. She certainly got fulsome applause from the assembled MPPs. There was a funny moment where you get marched into the legislature, and she sort of it was a literal misstep. She was walking in the wrong place, and Mike Schreiner had to sort of grab her and she did this sort of very funny to me anyway. She was sort of walking backwards like a robot in reverse. It was funny in the moment. Oops, shaking the desk.
I don't know this for sure, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was her first time she was ever in the legislative chamber. On the floor of the legislature, certainly not, during a session, would have been the first time she'd ever been there. So she could be forgiven for making a wrong turn.
Yes, I think I might have done the same.
Yeah. Well, let's pick up on the government's agenda here, because one of the first things the province is trying to get done in this session is pass a giant bill called the Get It Done Act. So we're going to do a bit of a deep dive on this now. First of all, what are some of the disparate elements that are in this mega bill?
Right. So this is one bill with many different sections that it does a bunch of different things. It bans tolls on bans new tolls on provincial highways. It legislates a freeze in the rate of in the fines for both Ontario driver's licenses and Ontario photo cards. It implements license plate renewals. Obviously, or maybe not obviously, folks remember that the government did away with the fee to renew their license plates, but it didn't do away with the obligation to renew license plates. And so it turned out that a lot of people, when they no longer had to pay the fee, they weren't renewing their plates. And the Toronto Star reported that there might have been as much as 1 million drivers on the road.
Whoops.
Yeah, whoops, exactly.
With expired plates.
Notably, one of the groups that was complaining most about the problems this was causing was the Ontario Provincial Police, who were saying, we can't spend our days pulling over every single driver with expired stickers. We need to figure out a solution here. And so the government is saying that plates will just renew automatically, except when there is some reason not to renew, so an existing speeding ticket or something like that. There is also a change to the environmental assessment process, where for provincial projects like highways, most notably, the government will be able to expropriate land even before the environmental assessment is complete. So for the 413 highway, for example, this is one of the big provincial priorities right now, the government is able to start acquiring the land to build that highway, even though the environmental assessment is likely to take many years. And then finally, the government is reversing, I think I can use that word. Re-reversing its decisions on urban land expansions. These were a bunch of cities across the province. The province stepped in and, sorry, I should say the government stepped in and expanded the amount of land that these cities could expand into, farmland that they could turn into subdivisions. Then late last year, because of the unpopularity of certain other land use decisions this government made, they reversed that decision. And then they are now saying, having consulted with these cities, because some cities were saying, actually, we do need to expand our urban boundaries. The government is now using legislation to re-expand some, but not all of those urban boundaries. Ottawa and Hamilton are being left alone.
That's a lot in a mega bill, and we're not done. There's more. The province is also hoping to pass an unusual requirement to hold a referendum in the future if what?
If any future government wants to introduce a carbon tax, and I think we would say generically that the government would hope this would also include the cap and trade system that they inherited and dismantled, that any kind of carbon pricing would require a referendum to be held and obviously would require a majority of voters to approve that carbon price.
Let me just make sure I understand this. The current government of Ontario is handcuffing future governments for the rest of all time in passing any new carbon tax or putting a price on carbon forever, unless they hold a referendum and get the public's permission.
They are trying to.
Well, if passed, yes, if passed. But that's the idea.
That's the idea.
Would it be churlish of me to point out, maybe it would be, but I'm going to do it anyway, the Mike Harris government tried the very same thing about 25 years ago, but at that time it was, there must be a referendum if any future government wants to raise taxes. And in fact, and that bill did pass,
yes.
In fact, a future progressive conservative government did want to raise taxes, but they simply passed another law saying we're going to have an exemption to the referendum law for these tax increases, and then they promptly legislated those tax increases, all of which is to say, do these laws requiring referendums in the future actually mean anything at all?
I'm going to get into this a bit more for the your column, my column bit. So I will just, for now, I will say no, they do not really handcuff future governments at all. In my column, I described it as performative nonsense, and I will elaborate on that later in the pod.
Okay, we'll come back to that because that's a good subject for discussion. We've been calling this a mega bill. We've been calling it a giant bill. In fact, the technical term for what the government is trying to do here, it's called an omnibus bill. And I took enough high school Latin to know that omnibus means for all or for everything. And essentially what it means is the government is going to throw everything but the kitchen sink into this bill, even if disparate elements in the bill have no particular relationship to one another. It's an approach. What do you think of that approach?
I will also add the omnibus was one of the first forms of mass transportation in early in industrial cities. But that's perhaps a nerdy point for a different podcast.
Definitely a McGrath point. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, these kinds of bills, it's a tool, right? And I think the classic example of an omnibus bill is like the budget measures bill that gets introduced, right? The finance minister gets up, he gives a big speech about all of the ways that the government is going to change policy to change the financial situation of the province, they would say for better. And by necessity, that can end up touching a lot of different parts of provincial policy. And so you need a bill that touches, that does a bunch of different things to match the budget plan.
Except that.
In this case, I think a lot of people would say that most modern governments have relied on omnibus legislation more than is strictly necessary. And in a case like this, it's especially when, frankly, a lot of the things that this bill does are symbolic, maybe. Maybe I won't repeat the word performative. It's just much more opportunistic.
And I have seen instances in the past, and I'll admit not many, but there have been some, where speakers of the legislature, who are often MPPs from the governing party, have told the governing party, I'm sorry, this violates the spirit of democracy. You can't have this many disparate elements in a bill which have nothing to do with one another and put them all in there together. It's just not appropriate. And they have said to governments in the past, you got to take some of that stuff out and try and pass it separately, which of course, if they've got a majority government, they can do. But it's about the appearance of doing democracy properly, I guess is the way I would put it.
Yeah, the fundamental point here is that MPPs are supposed to have the opportunity to debate matters properly. And when you shoehorn everything into one bill, sort of by definition, you're forcing the opposition to constrain the amount of time that they devote to any one part of the bill. And that's also true with budget bills, which are always, I believe they're almost always time allocated, right? You have a certain amount of time to pass the budget. With something like this, these things sort of all hang together a little bit if you sort of squint at it a little. But yes, I mean, the speaker does still retain the authority in some cases to tell a government, actually, this needs to be broken up and you need to give MPPs the ability to do their jobs.
We want to earn our bona fides here as a deeply nerdy podcast. So I am going to reach into the dark recesses of my memory and recall, I think, one of the most controversial omnibus bills ever passed, and this was in the federal parliament, and we're going back to the late 1960s now. John Turner, the former prime minister, was at this time the Minister of Justice and Attorney General for Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau. And Mr. Turner wanted to make a bunch of changes to the criminal code in Canada. He wanted to legalize abortion under some circumstances. He wanted to legalize homosexuality, which, if you can imagine, was illegal in Canada at that time. He wanted to change the rules around divorce so that, again, if you can imagine this, so that you would not have to go to the Parliament of Canada to get permission from Parliament to get a divorce. Yeah. And he wanted those and other criminal code amendments to pass. And Prime Minister Trudeau said to him, you got to do it in an omnibus bill because this is going to be fraught and we're going to go do it and do it all at once. And Mr. Turner, I would suggest to his credit, said, no, I want to break it up. I don't want to do them individually. But the Prime Minister wouldn't let him. And at the end of the day, it's the PM's prerogative, and the PM told him to do it all at once, and he did. And if you prefer the way it is in Canada today, under those three categories and more, you can thank John Turner for that. So there we go. Anyway, let's move along. On to your column, my column. Okay, time now for our regular feature, Your Column, My Column, in which JMM and I reminisce about the columns we wrote for TVO.org over the past week. JMM, you gave us a little hint of what you want to dive into again, so fire away.
Yeah, so I wrote about the Get It Done bill or Get It Done Act that the government has introduced, and I just want to sort of elaborate a little bit on my irritation with this kind of law, or rather the two elements, the referendum on the carbon tax and nominally prohibiting road tolls on public highways. Whatever you think about the policy merits of those positions, the fact is it is a fundamental principle of our Constitution that you cannot bind the hands of a future legislature by passing simple laws.
Which they're trying to do right now.
Which is what they are trying to do. And you mentioned the history of the Harris government passing what they call the Taxpayer Protection Act. Again, it's nothing to get around these laws. And what I think it does, though, is it leaves people misinformed about what our governments do and how they work. We are an educational broadcaster, and I'm somewhat partial to the idea that people should be properly informed about how governments work. This irritates me, and that's quite aside from the fact that I think at least, I've put this on the record previously that I actually support the idea of like road tolls and carbon pricing in both those cases. My views remain unpopular, but that's really beside this particular point.
Indeed. Okay, are you ready for a bit of a story?
I am, absolutely.
Get comfortable here, because I did a column this past week on something that basically was half a century or more in the making. For 52 years, there's a former finance minister in Ontario back in the 1970s named Darcy McHugh. He was Bill Davis's treasurer. And he used to host an annual, what he called the John P. Robarts Annual Luncheon. And it was a luncheon that he started to honor his mentor and political hero, Mr. Robarts, who was the first premier to put Mr. McHugh in the cabinet, as he did in the 1960s. Then after Mr. Robarts died in 1982, Mr. McHugh kept this luncheon going in memory of the former premier. And I don't know how long ago this was now, 15, 16, 17, I don't know. That a while ago, I wrote a book about John Robarts, and so I got invited to this lunch as well over the last many years. Now, last December, the lunch was always in December. This past December, the lunch didn't happen. It didn't happen because Mr. McHugh got sick and died. Age 91, he had a good life. But the question then remained what to do about this annual lunch. So I decided, with the permission of Mr. McHugh's two sons, to try to continue it with a few changes. First of all, I renamed it the Robarts McHugh Luncheon to acknowledge Mr. McHugh's creating it in the first place. And second, with apologies to the former treasurer, as he looks down on us right now, the guest list for the luncheon would no longer be exclusively white, male, octogenarian or nonagenarian progressive conservatives. We were going to broaden the base a bit. All parties were going to be invited, all genders, all generations, most importantly. I wanted younger people there as well. People who had been in public life, and it was really lovely to see all these people who, when they were in politics, were really trying very hard to end one another's political careers, were suddenly gathering together, there's about 3 dozen of them, and really enjoying the fellowship of one another's company in the spirit of friendship. And I had no intention of writing a column about it, but Monty McNaughton, the former Ford-era cabinet minister, he was there. He actually represented part of the same part of the province that Darcy McHugh did. Mm-hmm. And he suggested, the spirit in that room, people need to know about that. Pakin, you should write a column about that. And so I did. And I think we'll put the link to the column in the show notes, as we do for both of our columns. But if you want to find it, it's on the TVO website as well, TVO.org. Find my picture, click on it, the column will be there. There's some lovely pictures that we took on the day. I think my favorite is the current finance minister, Peter Bethlen-Falvey, flanked by 3 former cabinet ministers, Greg Sorbera, Floyd Loughran, Janet Ecker, all 3 different parties represented there. It was a nice moment. Peter Bethlen-Falvey in another picture with Ian MacDonald, who's now 95 and was the Deputy Minister of Finance in the Robarts years. So that was kind of a neat moment as well. Anyway, lots of fun. There seemed to be a lot of desire in the room to have this be an annual thing. So I think we're going to try to do that again next year.
I think it's very easy to, and there is legitimately a lot of acrimony in politics, and some acrimony is good and healthy.
Yeah.
And I think and this goes back to the ritual of that we were talking about with Aislinn Clancy. There is also a lot of genuine camaraderie in politics. I used the words right, like they're on different teams, but they're all playing the same game. Mm-hmm. And I think that explains some of it, that, when these people leave Queen's Park, they do still carry a lot of that time, the memories with them. And it's not like anywhere else. It's not like any other job. And these people are part of what is still a pretty small club overall, right? There's only 124 MPPs. Mm-hmm. And
in a province of, what are we up to now? Like 15 million people?
Million,
yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a pretty small club.
Yeah.
Good. All right, let's go on to our mailbag. We do love getting your feedback at onpolitics@tvo.org. And JMM, why don't you start? What do we got this week?
We have a bunch of questions and some very kind comments from our listeners and now viewers. Here is our first from Jason Bazadian from Toronto, who asks, "Hi, Pakin and JMM. Love the show and wanted to ask about the Lieutenant Governor." Note my pronunciation there.
Beautiful. Nicely done. Yeah.
How does one get the role? Is it purely an appointment, or are there some nominal requirements? Thanks, Jason.
Well, Jason, good question. The answer is both. Now, let's go through this. The Lieutenant Governor technically is appointed by the Governor General on the advice of the Prime Minister. Technically. Basically, the PM appoints who he or she wants to be the Lieutenant Governor in all of the provinces across Canada. It's usually a 5-year term, but as we know, during COVID, the federal government was just very content to let Elizabeth Dowdeswell stay there. She was doing the job so well. So she actually just finished the job in November after 9 years as Lieutenant Governor, longest serving in Ontario history. The list of functions that an LG needs to fulfill includes representing the Crown in Ontario, now the King, acting as sort of the official host of the province of Ontario at special events. They often pick particular causes that they want to champion. They recognize outstanding citizens. They preside over the Order of Ontario ceremony every year. The LG also, a lot of people don't know this, the LG has to sign every bill before it becomes law. So nothing becomes the law until it gets, quote unquote, royal assent. And you get that when the Lieutenant Governor signs the bill. It is also the Lieutenant Governor's job to advise, listen to, and warn the Premier of the day about what he or she is hearing. Now, Edith Dumont en français, she is the new Lieutenant Governor of Ontario, the first Francophone to hold the office. She's got the job now, and I haven't met her yet. Have you met her?
No, I have not met her.
I look forward to that day when it comes. Anyway, pick up the story if you would.
You already mentioned the causes that various LGs have traditionally brought to prominence. I mean, with David Onley, of course, it was accessibility. That was an issue that he cared deeply about because of his own life. Madame Dumont has a history of advocating for la francophonie, and so I don't know if she's said that will be her cause, but it wouldn't surprise anybody, certainly. We will wait and see what she turns her mind to.
Great. Okay, next up, here's a question from a viewer named John McMillan from Toronto who writes, "Hi, Steve and John. Stumbled onto your podcast/video debut on tonight's The Agenda after watching Jeopardy!, he adds. Signed up immediately to listen on Apple Podcasts. Fie on me for not knowing about your show before this. It's okay, John. We're glad to have you now." John continues, "I note that at the end of each Ontario government TV advertisement now includes a musical jingle or tag similar to the O Canada tag in the Government of Canada's ads. Ontario's musical tag appears to be the last few bars of Ontario, the province's 1967 centennial year anthem, A Place to Stand, which my generation, and I guess I can say which our generation, because I think John and I are in the same one, we learned that by rote." John's questions: does the Ontario government still own the rights to that song or jingle? And if so, which ministry owns it? And is it true that it was written by the same woman who wrote the old dun da dun da dun dun da dun da dun dun da dun da dun da 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 Hockey Night in Canada theme song? And as an aside, does the government really think that anyone other than boomers like me would get it? Great show. Looking forward to future episodes. Will tell my friends, John McMillan. Beautiful. Okay, John, thank you so much for that. Ontario, A Place to Stand, A Place to Grow was, in fact, written by the same woman, Dolores Clayman, who did the hockey theme on Hockey Night in Canada. It was commissioned by the government of John Robarts alongside the Academy Award-winning film A Place to Stand. That was for Expo 67 in Montreal when the World's Fair came to Montreal. The song's publisher is Gordon V. Thompson Music, so there is a good chance that the rights lay with someone else as opposed to with the government of Ontario. We're going to put a link to both the song and the film in the show notes. There's also a defunct page on the ontario.ca website that will post the archived version with a lot more info there as well. And look, let me say this outright. You don't have to be of a certain generation to love this song. Everybody knows this song, right? Do you know the song?
You know what? I actually don't.
Come on. McGrath, this is why you still need me. This is why you're not hosting this show on your own. Give us a place to stand and a place to grow, and we'll call this land Ontario, a place to live for you and me. You still nothing? Nothing.
I'm sorry, man.
Okay.
This was out of the schools by the time I was going through them.
But they brought it back for the Canada 150 celebrations. Kathleen Wynne's government brought it back.
Well, then I was out of school by then.
Okay. Well, anyway, it is a wonderful song. It is wildly nostalgic for those of us of a certain age, and I'm going to teach you the words before you're done here, okay? Your turn. Next note.
Boy, I just cannot wait. All right. Here is one from Nelson Mahmoudi from Ottawa who writes, "Hi, J-Man and Steve. Thanks for making such a great podcast. Love all the content and your coverage of complex topics, which make for easy listening while I'm on a break at work. Or, just while you're supposed to be working, you could listen to us anyway.
Why not?
We're not going to tell.
Nope.
Two questions for you both. Steve, were you at the PWHL game in Toronto between Montreal and Toronto? Let's take that one first. Were you at this hockey?
Professional Women's Hockey League, I watched it on TV. I was not at the game. It's too hard to get tickets. They're sold out for the whole of the year.
Well,
they're playing at Maple Leaf Gardens, where it's, like 2,100, 2,200 seats. So no, watched, but not in person.
Okay. Number 2, what's the difference between a hamlet, village, township, town, and city? Are there population thresholds that determine where certain municipalities fall for naming's sake? Nelson, this makes me so happy. I looked in the Municipal Act, but couldn't find anything. Help. Take care, you both.
Okay.
Nelson from Ottawa.
This is such a John Michael McGrath question, the second part. So I'm definitely tossing this one over to you to tell us the difference between a hamlet, a village, a township, a town, or a city. McGrath, you're on.
Okay, so some of these names refer to like when the first European surveyors laid out farm lots in what would have then been Upper Canada, and like hamlets and townships were like, and I guess villages would have been like the atomic particle of land that these surveyors created, and those are sort of like the very, very small smallest, not even municipalities exactly, but like smallest geographic increments of land in Ontario. And then when you get into things like towns and villages or towns and cities in particular, there's no distinction between the best example of this is that what is now the city of Markham was officially the town of Markham up until 2012, and it had a population of 300,000 people. It was the 12th largest municipality in the country, I think, if not, certainly it was one of the largest in Ontario. And yet it was called a town. There are no rules requiring a town to start calling itself a city once it reaches a certain population or anything like that. It is left entirely up to the local councils and what they feel like calling themselves.
You had far too much fun answering that question.
I loved reading that question. I loved answering it. And you know what? If people want to keep sending us really, really nerdy municipal policy questions, just know that, viewer, I'm here for you.
Why don't you give folks the email in case they want to do that very thing?
Oh, right. Yes. The email is,
It's onpolitics@tvo.org.
Right. If you'd like to ask about content on the show or just ask us random nerdy questions, please email us at onpolitics@tvo.org. Make sure to include your first name, last name, and what city you live in.
Amen. Well, that is the On Poly podcast for this Friday, February 23rd, 2024.
You can follow our shows on Apple Podcasts so that you get notified each time a new episode is available. And if you already follow our show, help a friend follow it too.
Any feedback you have, we're happy to hear it, good, bad, or indifferent. Here's the email again, onpolitics@tvo.org, and we're happy to take all your stuff.
This week's episode was produced and edited by Matthew O'Mara. Video podcast edited by Colin Kish.
Production support from Jonathan Hallowell, Christine Gardner, Ariana Longley, Vito Tagarelli, Jeff Kucera, and Jennifer DeRosa. Our managing editor is Katie O'Connor. Lori Few is the executive producer of Digital. John Ferry, vice president, programming and content. Special thanks to our wonderful studio crew here for making the video podcast happen. And until next Friday, bye-bye.
See you soon.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.